or I'm moving out.
You were mad that you were never a part of the family and mom finally accepts you and you want to move out? Are you crazy? Like, moving out of the house is not an option.
She said she's done, packed up her bags, walked out, and left Sumit standing there like he never mattered. No yelling, no dramatic speech, just a quiet walkaway after years of chaos, resentment, and sacrifice. Jenny, who moved across the world for this man, is finally ready to move out, not from the house, but from the entire marriage. And this time, she's not making idle threats. She's serious. Welcome to Reality Sport. I'm Oliva. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more messy, shocking stories from 90 Day Fiancé. And if you think Jenny's finally hit her limit, tell us in the comments. Would you have lasted this long? Jenny and Sumit's story was never built on stability. From catfishing to secret marriages, parental ultimatums, cultural clashes, and endless emotional tug-of-war, it's been survival mode since day one. For a while, they made dysfunction look functional. But now, that illusion's crumbled. Because Jenny didn't just leave their family drama, she might be leaving their entire life in India behind. After everything she gave up, she's choosing herself. Or at least trying to. And here's what's wild. Sumit didn't chase after her. No teary apology, no road to the airport sprint, nothing. He sat with the shock. Maybe he didn't believe she'd go through with it. Or maybe, deep down, he knew she'd been barely hanging on for months. Because when Jenny said she was done, she wasn't talking about a bad day. She was talking about emotional suffocation, growing resentment, and a version of love that stopped feeling like freedom a long time ago. Let's rewind. Jenny, a woman in her 60s, left her country, her grandkids, her retirement life, and her comfort zone to be with a man in his 30s in a country where she had no real roots. All for love. Or the dream of it. But here's what's key. Love wasn't the problem. The environment was. From the moment Sumit pressured her back into his parents' house under the weight of cultural expectations, she felt erased. Her routines were gone. Her peace was gone. Even her voice in her own marriage was slipping. She couldn't wear what she wanted. She couldn't cook when she felt like it. She couldn't even sit on the couch in shorts without offending someone. Imagine living with people who once threatened to disown their son, or worse, just for loving you, and now you're expected to act grateful for their bare minimum hospitality. Jenny stayed in that house with a fake smile and nonstop judgment for months. But it's always the quiet buildup that breaks the loudest. So she snapped. Calmly, firmly. She told Sumit, either they move out together, or she moves out alone. And if he can't handle choosing her over his family's comfort, then she's choosing herself. Finally. But the real twist? She'd already told his parents, behind his back, while his mother was sick. Jenny didn't wait for permission. She acted like a woman with nothing to lose. Now Sumit is fuming, not just because she made the decision, but because she made it without him. Control matters to him more than either of them are ready to admit. And being blindsided by Jenny flipped a switch. Not one of urgency, but one of ego. He felt disrespected, not scared. And that lack of fear, that's what's signaling Jenny that her exit plan might not be a bluff anymore. She didn't just tell him she was leaving. She acted like someone who already had. And if you look closely, Sumit seems more hurt by the loss of authority than by the loss of the relationship. But what pushed Jenny over the edge right now, after all these years of holding it in? What changed? And how did they go from fighting for each other to fighting each other in silence? Sumit always said he wanted a love marriage, but somewhere between chasing independence and folding back into tradition, he started shaping that love into something more familiar, something safer. For him, that meant staying close to his parents, soaking in the daily routine of joint family life, keeping Jenny within eyesight of the culture he was raised in. But Jenny didn't sign up to be anyone's daughter-in-law. She came to India to be a wife, not a cultural exhibit forced to nod along in silence. And here's the question that won't leave. Did Sumit ever genuinely think Jenny could thrive in that environment? Or did he think she'd eventually break down, surrender, and adapt? Because this wasn't a surprise to him. From the beginning, Jenny made it painfully clear she didn't want to live within laws, follow their rules, or transform into a woman 60 years younger and culturally obedient. She didn't marry Sumit to become a student of his mother. But maybe that's the part Sumit convinced himself she'd grow into. He spent so much time trying to get his parents to accept Jenny that he forgot to make sure Jenny was still accepting him. While he was playing peacekeeper, she was counting the ways she disappeared, bit by bit, under the weight of adjustments that always seemed to ask more of her. And when those adjustments started looking more like erasures, love started to feel like something you had to shrink inside of to survive. Sumit paints his sacrifices like trophies. He got divorced. He risked his reputation. He chose Jenny again and again. But what if choosing someone while still tying them to your comfort zones isn't real choice? What if it's control, dressed up in good intentions? Jenny, on the other side, compromised too. She lived in a country that still treats her like a punchline. She gave up her familiar life in California to sit in a living room in India, where she's criticized for wanting to sip tea in shorts. These aren't small asks, and when every boundary she set was casually reshaped by Sumit as just for now, what else could she do but panic? The limits weren't new. The silence around them was. Sumit kept chasing this fantasy life, parents in the next room, wife slightly bent but still smiling, culture intact, no one too angry. And for a while, that illusion held. But illusions are fragile. Jenny was never quiet, because she agreed. She was just exhausted. And when her emotional tank hit empty, he looked confused, as if this hadn't been coming for months. So, was this a love story built on compromise? Or one slowly hollowed out by two people wanting different lives in the same house? And more importantly, is Sumit still chasing a version of love that only works if Jenny keeps giving in? Jenny didn't walk into that house to start a new chapter. She walked into a marathon of silent tests. Every morning felt like a performance. Every move she made was under someone's watchful eye. Even breathing loud felt like a crime some days. The furniture was the same. The house was technically hers too, but she was always a guest. Not in words, in energy, in feeling, in the way she was tolerated, not embraced. She wasn't banned from existing. But she was boxed in by 1,000 small signals. What not to wear, when to eat, who to talk to, how to talk to them, and when to disappear so the rest of the family could feel comfortable. These weren't abuse tactics, but they weren't love either. It was quiet control, woven through tradition. And Sumit? He made it all sound romantic. Like this was unity. Like this was the dream life. 2 generations under one roof, harmony through habit. But for Jenny, it was isolation in the name of loyalty. There was always someone in the kitchen with unsolicited advice. Always a mother-in-law resetting the rules. Always a father with a disapproving look that didn't need words. She couldn't even sit and watch TV in peace. The most basic act of comfort was a political statement. Wearing shorts? Indecent. Relaxing in a loose t-shirt? Disrespectful. Living like an adult woman in her own home? Unacceptable. Not because anyone screamed at her, but because gears would shift. Conversations would end. Discomfort would thicken in the air. So why did Sumit, after years of earning his parents' approval from a distance, force the one woman who stood by him through everything to trade autonomy for stability? Because, if we're being honest, he didn't want approval. He wanted redemption. He wanted to be the obedient son and the devoted husband. And Jenny became collateral in that impossible mission. The family's so-called acceptance came laced with conditions. They'd let her in, but only if she stopped acting like herself. Only if she played humble. Only if she forgot she was American and 65 and had already lived a full life before even meeting Sumit. And that's the trap no one talks about. Conditional love disguised as cultural respect. Jenny wasn't rejected anymore, but she also wasn't seen. She was allowed proximity, not partnership. Sumit stood by her in public. But behind those walls, he expected her to erase the very parts their relationship was built on. Comfort, ease, laughter. She gave those up for a hallway of whispers and a bed that didn't even feel like hers. So, when does tradition stop being culture and start becoming control? And after all this time, did Sumit's family really accept Jenny? Or just train her to accept the minimum? Jenny didn't tiptoe around it. She went straight to the nerve center of the problem, Sumit's parents, and told them, without their son present, that she was done with this living arrangement, that she couldn't breathe under the weight of their rules anymore. No warm-up, no couples discussion first, just a move made behind backs, under stress and far past her limit. And when Sumit found out, it wasn't heartbreak he showed, it was rage. He didn't ask her why she'd done it. He didn't wonder what had brought her to that edge. All he saw was disrespect. In his eyes, she went rogue. She stepped outside the chain of command. But maybe the better question is, what chain was she supposed to stay in when she's barely being heard? For months, she had been quietly asking, then begging, for boundaries. A little privacy, a room to herself, a say in their lives. Every time Sumit tossed out a line about soon, or after things settle, or once they understand us better, time became a weapon. And what Jenny finally understood was this. If she kept waiting for the situation to get more comfortable, she'd never move at all. So she made the move. Was it calculated? Not really. It was survival, dressed as a power play. Because sometimes silence becomes a kind of dishonesty too. Jenny wasn't trying to start a war. She was trying to end the one no one else would acknowledge. And here's what knocks the wind out of you. The conversation itself wasn't loud. Jenny didn't fight. She didn't insult. She didn't threaten them. She simply told the truth, that living like this was making her miserable. She said it with respect, maybe more than they deserved, because she wasn't looking for drama. She was looking for peace. But Sumit didn't hear any of that. All he heard was that the worshipped family chain had been jumped, that his wife moved a chess piece without his permission. To him, it read like betrayal. Because for Sumit, control has always been disguised as protection. And now that grip was slipping. Which brings us to the real tension here. Why is Sumit angrier about being cut out of the conversation than he is about the fact his wife feels trapped and depressed in the home he insisted on? What he's reacting to isn't injustice, it's embarrassment. Ego. The idea that his Western wife, the one his whole society said was too old, too different, too inappropriate, went behind his back and made a move he should have made first. He expected loyalty. But Jenny gave him results. And in a house that demands quiet obedience, her defiance carries more than just volume. It exposes the very thing no one wants to admit, that for some people, choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's finally breathing again. So, was this a sneak attack? Or the only sane move left for someone being told to sit down and smile while she's slowly disappearing? Sumit sat there, listing his sacrifices like a man reading from a scoreboard. 7 years, he said. 7 years of battles, shame, disownment threats, divorcing another woman, going against everything his family told him to protect. And for what? For Jenny. That's his narrative anyway. He repeats it not just to her, but almost like he's convincing himself it was all worth it, that she owes him something permanent. But if love is always stacking receipts, is it still love? Or is it a tally sheet? He throws out that divorce line like it was a gift wrapped in martyrdom. But let's tell the truth. That divorce wasn't purely for Jenny. It was for himself too. He didn't love the woman his parents matched him with. He admitted that. So, while letting go was painful, it wasn't exactly selfless. Framing it like a heroic act done only for Jenny sounds noble, until you remember she didn't ask him to marry someone else behind her back in the first place. Then came the living apart. The secret romance. The phone calls filled with promises. The resistance from his parents. Yes, Sumit paid a heavy emotional price to be with Jenny, but that doesn't mean he gets to cash in those tokens now every time she has a need of her own. Marriage isn't a contract of, I suffered for you, now sacrifice back. And that's where it gets dangerous, because every time Jenny expresses pain, Sumit counters with his own suffering. Like it's a competition of who gave up more. But the problem with measuring sacrifice is it keeps the game playing. No one wins. He talks less about connection now, more about cost. Less about love, more about loyalty. So you have to ask, does he want closeness or a return on emotional investment? Cultural pressure? Absolutely. Indian sons are often taught that a good adult life includes service to both wife and parents. But those two roles and their expectations don't always fit in the same house. Instead of choosing clarity, Sumit chose to juggle both identities at once, husband and son. But the thing about fences is, the more you straddle them, the more you tear yourself apart. The truth is, Sumit's been clinging to pain like it gives his choices weight. Like if he suffered enough, that would mean this relationship is still sacred. But pain isn't proof of love. It's just a shadow of it. And if he's using old battles as a shield against present accountability, he's not defending Jenny. He's defending his own pride. So who is Sumit really trying to convince? Jenny? His parents? Or himself? And when love turns into emotional debt, is there any room left for actual care? Jenny had nothing. No savings to fall back on. No guaranteed home in India. No steady income. And still, she looked Sumit dead in the eyes and said, I'm leaving. With or without you. That wasn't a threat for drama. That was a woman at her limit who realized something life-changing. Love may have been what brought her here, but it's no longer enough to make her stay. For years, the power balance leaned towards Sumit. His language, his land, his family, his culture. Jenny played catch-up in every area, and for the longest time, she tried to keep up. She softened her American directness. She agreed to awkward family dinners where she barely existed in the room. She wore Indian outfits she didn't always feel comfortable in. She adjusted every part of her identity to keep this love alive, until her sense of self was threadbare. But now, that's slipping. Or maybe she's finally reclaiming it. Because when Jenny told Sumit she'd move out alone if he didn't come with her, something shifted. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She became cold, still, clear. That's what real breaking points look like. When someone stops arguing and simply walks away from the table. And let's be honest, Sumit didn't know what to do with that. He's used to the tug of war. He thinks love always ends with someone giving in. This time, no one pulled. Jenny just let go of the rope. So, was this always her plan? An emergency exit waiting in the background? Maybe not consciously, but deep down, Jenny always knew if push really came to shove, her ultimate choice would be going home. America may be complicated, but it holds safety nets Sumit's world never gave her. Her daughters live there. Her healthcare. Her familiarity. Those things aren't luxuries. For someone aging in a foreign land without support, those are survival tools. And that's the part Sumit underestimated. He thought she couldn't leave because India had her boxed in. He assumed she was too dependent to act. But Jenny's not helpless. She's just been patient. And now that she's choosing herself, he has to ask himself an uncomfortable question. Is he about to lose his wife? Or is he only now noticing that she's already halfway gone? Because make no mistake, emotional power has shifted. For the first time, Jenny holds the option that ends everything. She isn't threatening divorce for leverage. She's presenting it as her plan B. And that's terrifying to him. Sumit's presence in Jenny's life has always framed itself as rescue. He saved her from loneliness, from a boring California retirement, from being unwanted. But now, the rescue story is reversing. Jenny doesn't want to be saved anymore. She wants to be respected. And this right here is the messy truth no one wants to say out loud. Sometimes, love becomes a trap. Not because it starts that way, but because when one person does all the bending and the other builds walls in the name of culture or fear or family, it stops being mutual. Jenny started realizing that survival wasn't about pushing through. It was about escaping. And somewhere in that house, between the silent dinners, the backhanded comments, and the complete lack of physical freedom, she stopped seeing India as a chapter in their love story. It started looking more like a prison she voluntarily walked into. Sumit calls it our life. Jenny calls it his parents' house. That alone tells you how disconnected they are in how they define home. And that's the thing. If two people can't even agree on where they're building their future, how can they share one? Now he's scrambling, trying to remind her of everything they've survived. The court fights, the TV judgment, the taboo of their age gap. But none of that changes the fact that right now, Jenny doesn't feel like a wife. She feels like a tolerated guest in someone else's movie. And what's wild is, this version of Jenny? Clear, calm, unafraid to leave, might be the one thing Sumit never prepared for. He was ready for drama. He was ready for pleading. But he never prepared for what it feels like when the woman you love no longer needs you to feel free. That's not rebellion. That's reclamation. He keeps saying, "How can you live alone?" Probably thinking it'll guilt her into staying. But you know what? She probably can't live alone in India comfortably. She is older, retired, financially unsure, and culturally out of place. But she's still saying, "I'll try." And that courage says more about the state of this marriage than any past sacrifice can fix. So now, the big question isn't just will she leave? It's can he risk what happens if she does? Because once Jenny resets her mind to freedom, no guilt trip, no cultural speech, no memory of sacrifices will be enough to undo that clarity. Self-worth has a short memory for what hurt it, but it has a long attention span for what heals. And Jenny is finally searching for healing, not excuses. So, is Sumit ready to be a partner? Or does he only know how to be a gatekeeper? And when the woman you said you'd fight the world for quietly starts packing her bags, is it time to look inward? Or just watch her walk out the door? They're both staring at each other like enemies trapped in a cold war. No yelling, no tears. Just long silences, bitter stares, and moments where you wonder if they even like each other anymore. The love is still there somewhere, buried under 7 years of battle scars, bruised pride, and unspoken resentment. But love alone doesn't fix contempt. And right now, this marriage feels less like a partnership and more like a hostage situation where compromise is off the table. Sumit won't budge. Jenny won't bend. And every conversation dissolves into quiet standoffs where no one says what they really mean. Because saying it out loud would require admitting that they've both changed, and not necessarily in ways that are still compatible. Jenny isn't the same woman who arrived in India with wide eyes and blind optimism. That woman was willing to defy the odds, ignore the stares, and overlook the emotional cracks for the fantasy of happily ever after. But this Jenny? She's sharper, guarded, and tired of carrying the emotional weight. She looks at that small room in her in-laws' home and sees her independence slowly rotting. Sumit, on the other hand, isn't the same man begging his parents to approve of his older foreign girlfriend. Back then, he had something to prove. Now, he has something to protect, his pride. He finally got the family's grudging acceptance, and he wears it like a badge of honor. That badge? It came with a price tag, and he expects Jenny to respect the cost. But respect isn't the same as obedience. Underneath all their arguments is one unspoken question neither wants to say aloud. Are we still doing this out of choice or fear? Because what happens when a relationship is too heavy to carry, but too familiar to drop? That's where they are now, clinging to a routine that doesn't serve them anymore, simply because the idea of starting over feels more terrifying than staying stuck. And that's how pride works. It convinces you that being right is more important than being together. It convinces you that backing down means defeat. But in love, refusing to yield becomes its own kind of loss. They're not fighting for each other anymore. They're fighting not to be the one who gave up first. Sumit frames it as patience, waiting for Jenny to cool off, waiting for compromise. But what he's really waiting for is for her to come back to the version of herself that tolerated emotional discomfort just to avoid breaking his heart. That version is long gone, replaced by someone who sees survival as harder than separation. And Jenny, while she packs her emotional bags, hasn't fully committed to leaving either. That's the tragedy. She's testing the ground to see if he'll follow. If there's a version of Sumit willing to step up, own his part, and put her first without hiding behind cultural guilt or martyr narratives. At the same time, she's preparing for the silence that says he won't. There's so much unsaid between them. She wants him to ask her how she truly feels. He wants her to recognize what he's already done. But neither of them has the tools or maybe the willingness to translate effort into understanding. And so, they sit across from each other, two people nursing invisible injuries, waiting for the other to break character. She thinks if she leaves, it'll finally make him change. He thinks if he waits long enough, she'll snap out of it and return to the woman who used to smooth over every fight just to keep peace. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They're both bluffing, and they both know it. Because beneath all that anger is fear. Not fear of being wrong, but fear of being alone. And that's what's keeping them tethered. Not growth, not hope, just fear. Fear that this relationship was the only thing anchoring them to something bigger than the routine. Fear that walking away means accepting failure in front of millions of viewers who thought they'd made it through the storm. Fear that maybe, after years of sacrifice, they're still two wildly incompatible people trying to squeeze themselves into a mold that cracked a long time ago. They still say I love you, but it sounds more like a memory than a feeling. They still sleep next to each other, but not like partners, more like witnesses to a slow motion collapse neither knows how to interrupt. It's chilling how quiet it's gotten. So what happens next? Do they walk away to save themselves? Or stay to prove something to everyone else? And if no one moves, how long before the silence becomes the last word? There she was, alone in the tell-all studio. Not in India, not next to her husband, not on a split-screen Zoom call, but sitting in front of the cameras, in the United States. Jenny wasn't just visiting. She was back. And if that doesn't scream marriage in crisis, nothing will. This wasn't a joint appearance, where they awkwardly hold hands while dodging uncomfortable questions. This was Jenny, solo, and her message couldn't have been more clear. She wasn't going to keep sitting in silence, waiting for things to change, because they didn't. And maybe, she finally realized, they never would. For years, she stayed through the emotional distance, the cultural push and pull, The humiliating rejection from Sumit's parents, the in-law wars, and the broken promises. She told herself that love was worth it, that eventually things would balance out, that being patient would pay off and Sumit would stand beside her fully, not half in his family's world, half in hers. But the door never opened all the way. Love, in their marriage, began to feel like a hallway with no exit. And now, in this quiet, dramatic act of return, Jenny may have made the first real choice for herself in years. The reveal shook fans. No soft lead-up, no dramatic scene of her boarding a plane. Just this. She's in America. She left. And Sumit? Still in India, still explaining, still defending his choices, still clinging to the idea that this is just another fight. But this wasn't a fight. This was fallout. So the question sharpens. Did he let her leave? Or did his resistance finally push her out? Because the day she said, "I'm leaving," Sumit had a choice. He could have packed up and walked with her into a new kind of marriage, one where both of them set the terms. Instead, he froze. He made excuses. He held tight to the structure of the life he was protecting, and by doing so, lost the person he built it for. And now, all the grand gestures, all the emotional speeches don't matter. She's not in the same country. She's not under his roof. She's gone. It's easy to write this off as a cooling-off period, a temporary separation. But Jenny's energy at that tell-all didn't feel temporary. It felt final. Or, if not final, then transformed. She looked tired. Not bitter, not angry, just done. Like someone who'd finally stopped trying to force love into an unlivable shape. Still, there's a sliver of hope sitting in the corner. There always is, with people who've truly loved each other. But hoping he can earn her back, that's different than assuming he should. It's not just about showing up with flowers at an airport. That romantic nonsense won't cut it anymore. If Sumit wants his wife back, he needs to stop framing Jenny as someone who doesn't understand India, or his parents, or his culture. He needs to start seeing her as someone who's been painfully understood the entire time, yet still chose him over and over, until she couldn't anymore. And what would it actually take to bring her back? Not promises. Not compromises that crumble after 2 weeks. Not more sacrifices she didn't ask for, and not more guilt wrapped in devotion. What it would take is action. Real change. A real move toward a life together. Not one where she's squeezed into whatever shape fits best that day. But maybe, just maybe, that chapter is closed. Maybe Jenny flew back, not from Sumit, but back to herself. And maybe that's the happiest ending she could ever write. And now, the tension flips. What does Sumit do when he realizes he's no longer the one being left, but the one who's already been left behind?